We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Ghislaine Maxwell back in court. An dastardly plan to scare lawyers into supporting left-leaning causes only. It's a swamp out there. But to help us navigate the murky legal waters, we're lucky to be joined by constitutional lawyer and host of the excellent Uprising podcast, Mr. Scott D. Cosenza, Esquire. Welcome back, Scott.
Thank you, Mark, and it's good to be here.
So, Scott, let's go through this bit by bit. Ghislaine Maxwell, is she going to get a new trial?
Maybe. I think if I was, this is not a expert analysis, but yes, is my guess.
All right, what are the grounds for that?
She was in federal court again this week because one of the jurors on her case, said after the verdict in a comment to a media outlet that he had been abused as a child, and he relayed that and used that experience to basically further her conviction, to vote guilty on it and how it affected him. But he, on this juror questionnaire, said that he had not been affected, that abused as previously. So he now says that he sped past it. He was distracted. He was tired, and he actually asserted his right against self-incrimination, and they had to give him immunity from prosecution for the crime of perjuring himself on the juror questionnaire in order to get him to testify this week in federal court about that questionnaire.
In cases where this does happen, whether through making misstatements or the other, is there often a retrial? Is there like a betting average on when this does end up in a new trial and when it doesn't?
I don't think that there's enough data to say, Mark. I certainly haven't seen any studies that or have access to enough cases to have developed my own understanding of this. But it's a pretty huge thing if a person, it's not like I'm sure that the juror questionnaire included, for instance, have you ever been convicted of a crime? And let's say he had been convicted of like a DUI like 20 years ago, or just some possession of cocaine 15 years ago. It's hard to tie that directly to the outcome in the Ghislaine Maxwell criminal trial, right? Because even though it's an important question to ask and answer correctly, and he should have answered it in my hypothetical correctly about that other thing, it's not the same thing as whether or not you've been victimized before. And this is, again, a trial about Ghislaine Maxwell, basically aiding and abetting the victimization of people. So because it's such an important question relative to that juror's ability to be impartial, I think it leans towards granting a new trial. And again, this is a juror who was so reticent to testify again about this questionnaire that he had to be immunized against prosecution in order to take the stand.
Okay, final question on this particular topic. Now, if this does head back for a retrial, are her chances improved or hindered of winning the trial?
The question about the retrial, who it would benefit, I think it's a fascinating one. Typically, we think that retrials benefit the prosecution, okay? But if you're already convicted, as Ghislaine Maxwell is, then it's a second free bite at the apple. But the reason why we think it generally benefits the prosecution is because the prosecution witnesses are usually sort of like cops and investigators who the defense is able to depose before trial. So usually before trial, the defense knows by and large the evidence that the prosecution is going to present and the testimony that its witnesses are about to give. But the same can't be said for the prosecution. There's some murkiness, behind what the defense witnesses may say and the defense arguments and theory of the prosecution. That's more of a surprise to prosecutors than the prosecution arguments are a surprise to the defense. So that's like, if you retry the case, it's almost like, well, you're not going to come up with a completely new theory of the case. Certainly the evidence is going to be the same. So that argues for advantage prosecution. But here's another kind of wrinkle in this whole story. Right after the prosecution rested and Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted, we see some of the names of the people who were like secret secret witnesses because of their age at the time of the crimes were not allegedly proven now committed against them. But then afterwards, they went out and they went on TV, talked about settlements, and so when they come back to court, if they come back to court, Mark, in a re-prosecution of Ghislaine Maxwell, and just to be clear, if their conviction is thrown out, I would bet anything that they will retry her, to be sure. I think it's going to be a weaker case because there'll be more information about them. Just for instance, one aspect is we're learning more through the civil trial of Alan Dershowitz and Virginia Giuffre about roles that she may have undertaken to traffic people. And she'd previously been, thought of almost exclusively as a victim in the court's eyes, in any case. So now she wasn't a witness in the Ghislaine criminal trial, and I think that's why. But one of the persons who she may have aided in trafficking was. So it gets complicated. Certainly to be sure, if you're a person who's convicted and you get a new trial, that's a great thing for you. And it's not a great thing if you have to re-prosecute a trial that you already won. Okay. So we will obviously keep our eyes on it.
And the final question I want to hit you with today, Scott, is the 65 Project. Could you give us a little bit of background on this and tell us why this is important?
These are a bunch of Clinton regulars, especially and including David Brock, who's made it his mission in life to agitate for and defend Hillary Clinton against any enemy, foreign or domestic. And he's turned his guns on Trump's lawyers and basically is to declare that anybody who helped Donald Trump litigate the after-election matters is going to be hounded by him into oblivion, including complaints to their state bar committees and also just advertisements so that they be shunned culturally and professionally. It's the latest in the bleeding edge of being woke and trying to turn somebody into a canceled non-person.
Now, this isn't just lawyers who worked directly for Donald Trump, is it? This is lawyers who worked on causes that were relevant.
On the post-election efforts, I would say. Yeah. Yes, that's right.
And so this idea that lawyers should be targeting other lawyers who owe their clients a defense. That's right, isn't it? They owe their clients a defense.
I'm waiting for them to start suing the people who printed up the Trump election signs for some kind of regulation on him. Like it's like anybody close to him or who helped him in any way, they're going to go after. It's all part of the sort of total war against all things Trump from the Clinton side.
Yeah, I think the real danger here is that you're creating a culture of destruction. And this might, in fact, be the 65 Project's goal. It's to scare anybody who might want to represent a cause that is not only directly related to Donald Trump, but anything that runs afoul of the left-leaning dominant ideology. Does that make sense?
That only makes sense. That's what's happening. That's why they're progressives and not liberals. They are illiberal.
Scott's reported on this 65 Project on the pages of libertynation.com. I recommend you all go and read it. And I want to thank you, Scott, for being here. Much appreciated.
Cheers. Thank you, Mark.
And that's almost it for this episode of Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. I'd like to say a special thank you to today's guests, Lisa K. Donner, Andrew Moran, Dave Patterson, and Scott D. Cosenza. And of course to you at home for taking the time to join us here. My final thoughts to leave you with this week. It seems to me that we're living in an age of spin over substance, a time when it's more important to craft a positive narrative than to actually engage in substantive action. We see this in America, where the Fourth Estate and the Biden administration appear to be crafting a grand epic battle that seeks to take its place in the annals of history alongside the Battle of Thermopylae. And while nothing should take away from the brave Ukrainian people engaged in a fight for their very survival, this seizing of opportunity to make a failing president appear the grand statesman leading the world in its response to Russian aggression smacks of little more than party political fiction. When the dust finally settles, the approved government narrative will be that Joe Biden saved the world, and any who dare speak against that proposition will be deemed to be parroting Russian propaganda. We've all seen this playbook dragged out time and time again, and perhaps it's time to just admit that first, we wouldn't be in this situation if it were not for these constant machinations. And second, perhaps most importantly, is that a large proportion of the world's media is more interested in presenting a good story that serves its ideological purposes than in presenting the actual truth to the people it's meant to serve. That's it for this week. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fight for freedom.
Maybe tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a real big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.